नमस्ते प्रिय मित्राणि, तर्हि अहम् आशां करोमि यदस्मिन् अन्तिमसप्ताहे युष्माकं संस्कृतपठनस्य उत्साहः वर्धितः जातः अस्ति। गतवर्गे वयं समासानां गभीराध्ययनं कृतवन्तः। तत्र अभ्यासस्य अपि अवसरः कल्पितः आसीत्। तत्र अन्तिमभागः अव्ययीभावः समासः इति आसीत्, किन्तु अव्ययं किम् इति अस्माभिः एतावता न दृष्टमस्ति। अतः मया चिन्तितं यद् अद्यतनवर्गे अव्ययप्रकरणम् अधिकृत्य वयं किञ्चित् अन्वेषणं करिष्यामः, अभ्यासाञ्च। तर्हि नमस्ते dear friends and a very warm welcome to you again. We've been looking at the different forms of samasas in our previous class, and I sincerely hope that now you're feeling more excited about taking on any kind of study of texts by yourselves. When we looked at the samasas, the last part of the samasas was known as the avyayi bhava samasaha. The avyayam or the indeclinables is something that we haven't yet looked at in more detail. So in today's lecture, which is part of module 8, with the samasas, the compound words, the avyayam, the indeclinables, the anvaya and the course summary, we'll be looking at lecture 24, which is an introduction and practice of the avyaya prakaranam or the indeclinables. We will revisit the building blocks of the sentence, the dimensions of the Sanskrit words, the subantaha, tingantaha and the avyayani or the indeclinables. And then I'll introduce you to the concept of the avyayani, and with the practice, we'll do some conversation for building vocabulary as we always do, and an application of the points that we've learned. We'll also look at some other verses on dharma, and then there will be a quote on Sanskrit as a sacred language. In fact, we are planning to combine the conversation with the verses on dharma with Piyusha. That's an overview again that you're very familiar with. Looking at the avyaya prakaranam or the indeclinables. I just want to go back to one thing, because we've looked at the subantas in great detail and we've looked at the tingantahas also. But what we have not touched upon is the avyaya part of it. So that's what we will be studying more closely today. Tari atra kim asti avyaya lakshanam kim asti. What's the characteristic of the avyaya? Yesham padanam linga vibhakti vachana nimitto rupa bhedo nasti tani avyayani ityuchyante. What is it? Avyaya is a word which has no gender, case or number and which undergoes no change. Uktam cha sadrisham trishu lingeshu sarvasu cha vibhaktishu vachaneshu cha sarveshu yannavyeti tadavyayam. Okay, saying the similar thing but in prose, in verse form. And this is a fantastic feature of the Sanskrit language, that you can convert practically any kind of information into a very beautiful, memorizable verse. Astu, tari yadi atratya shlokasya mukhastham kurvanti, tari avyayam kim iti tasya lakshanasya smaranam bhavishyati. Avyaya prakaraha. Tari atra eka kritam asti, eka map asti tatra. So you've got avyaya prakaraha, tatra you've got avyayi bhava samasa. So we've just touched upon that lightly. Then you've got the visheshanam, because in the avyayi bhava samasa also you get an avyayam as the ending. All words are not necessarily gendered. There might be some words that become indeclinables. Then visheshanam. So kriya visheshanani, the relationship between adjectives and adverbs. Subanta pratirupakani. So with the subantas, some of them become the avyayas. Tinganta pratirupakani, similarly there. Tadhitantani also get it. Kridantani also become avyayas. Sarvanama, there are some pronouns in that category that remain avyayas. You've got sankhya, numbers also get that form. And then kala vachakani, so indicating time, those words also are avyayas very often. And avashishtani avyayani, and there are a few others that we will look at. Take each of them in a little more detail. So avyayi bhava samasaha sarvopyavyayattvena jneyaha. So what are they saying? Yatha upanagaram. It ends up becoming a avyayam there. Adhivriksham, okay, in the tree. Madhye margam, they all become avyayas. Next, visheshanani, that's adjectives, will become avyayani when used as kriya visheshanani. So when adjectives turn into adverbs, then they become an avyaya padam. So yatha sundaram gamanam. Sundara shabdo visheshanam, that's an adjective. स एव सुन्दरं गच्छति is going beautifully इत्यत्र क्रियाविशेषणम् adverb भवति अतः सुन्दरम् अव्ययं भवति. नेक्स्ट सुबन्त प्रतिरूपकानि कानिचित् अव्ययानि दृश्यन्ते. So there are some subantas. So you have yatha astam, that setting, namaha, swasti, swaha, swadha, pitru, kam. All of these words remain as indeclinables or avyayas. Others, tinganta pratirupikani kanichid avyayani. Tari, you've got some verbs also that act like avyayas at times. You've got like asti, nasti, asmi, aha, asa. All of these will become avyayas, okay? But you've also got further on tadhitani avyayani trividhani. So in the tadhita verbs, you've got some words that become the avyayas. So you've got, for example, tasillantani. So we haven't looked at tasil as a tadhita during that time, but see, you get an opportunity to encounter new pratyayas as your study expands. Atra kim bhavati? So you've got matritaha. You remember panchavibhakti equivalent? I said we've got some simplified equivalents for the vibhaktis. So matritaha, from the mata. So this taha is a tasil anta tadhita because it gets added to a noun form. So from the mother. Pitra pitritaha uttamam. Adi, from the beginning, aditaha. Madhya madhyataha. Swara, from the voice, swarataha. Hasta hastataha. Delhi dehlitaha. Sanskrita sanskritataha. Sanskritataha kim milati? Sanskritataha mahan anandaha milati. Astu. Tari, this is a tasilanta word, and what is important to note is that it is an avyaya padam. It will not change. Next, vatvantani. So vat, words that have vat. So you've got vat is affixed in the sense of equally with or like. Tadvat, equally, with that, etc. Okay, so tadvat, for example, Lata Mangeshkar vat, for example. Okay, so tatha na gayami, for example. Astu evam kritva bhinna bhinna shabdanam prayogam kartum shaknumati. But vat, although it looks like a vatu, like a matu pratyaya sometimes, or a ktavatu also gets the vat ending at times. In this case, it would be the matu, becomes like bhagavat, for example. So that vat looks like a vat, but it's not in the sense of equally with or like, and therefore it will not be declinable. So it is an avyaya padam. Atra shas antani. So what are the ones with shas? Alpashaha, bahushaha, khandashaha. So it indicates a part of, sort of, little by little, mostly, etc. Okay. Tari atra sarvani padani ante avyayani bhavanti. Next, kridantani avyayani trividhani. So it says that in declinable past participles, ktvantani yatha gatva, kritva, drishtva iti sarve api avyaya padani santi. Next, you've got sarve shabdaha tatra. Lyabantani, ya is added instead of twa. So when you have an upasarga, tada lyap bhavati. So you get nirgatya, sanskritya, sandrishya ityadika shabdaha api avyayaha santi. Tumunantani, kim bhavati? Gantum, kartum, drashtum, vaktum. Try to do a few. So just see if you can find one or two words in this. I'll just pause for just a fraction so that you can think of maybe 3 other words that you know in this category. Astu, uttamam. Tari kripaya participate karotu. Yada nimantrayami vaktum kripaya vadantu eva. Avyaya prakarakaha tatra sarvanama avyayani api bhavanti. These avyayas are derived from sarvanama shabdas. What are they? Yat. So yat is a pratipadikam. What are the other transformations it undergoes due to the different kinds of suffixes that are added to it? So yat, for example, becomes yada, yatra, yatha, yataha. And you can read the translations. Astu. Similarly, you can have these kind of translations for various kinds of pratipadika sarvanama padani. So you've got tat, tada, tadanim, tatras, tatha, tarhi. Idam, idanim. Okay, so idanim comes from idam. Atra, itham, ataha. Etat, etarhi, atra, itham, ataha. Next, kim, kada, kutra, kua. Kua gachasi, kutra gachasi, they're all the same there. Next, katham, kutaha. Kutaha can mean why or from where. And we had that Delhi taha, the taha that we just saw. Astu? Next, sarva, sarvada, sada, sarvatra, sarvatha, sarvataha. Anya, anyada. So there are many new words that you will also encounter. Anyatra, anyatha, do it in another manner. Anyatha karoti. And anyataha, from another place. So eka, ekada, ekatra, ekataha. Next, adas, amutra, amutaha. So there in the next word from that place or person. Got a few more. Para becomes paratra, parataha. Next, apara, aparatra, aparatha, in another manner, aparataha. So it's telling Piyush that atra kechana prayogaha santi yat praya asmakam dainandina vyavaharena santi eva. So there are many of these words that we don't necessarily use in our conversational Sanskritam, and might be a good idea to try and see if you can bring them back into practice. Purva, purvatra, purvataha, anantaram ubhaya, ubhayatra, ubhayatha, ubhayataha, uttara, uttaratra, uttarataha, uttarena, dakshina, dakshinataha, dakshinena. And then you've got the sankhya avyayani. So you've got sakrit, dvihi, trihi, chatuhu, panchakritvaha, which is also equivalent to panchavaram, like you can see. By adding kritva to any number other than 1 to 4, similar multiples are formed. Varam also has many, also may be added to numbers to form similar multiples. Ekavaram, dvivaram, once, twice, thrice, etc. Next, atra kimasti, ekadha, once, okay, in one way. Dvidha, in two ways. So you see, dvidha is also another word that is used for having a doubt, having a dvidha, which means that psychologically you are not confident about one way in your decision making. It can be this way or it can be that way as well. Astu. Next, dvedha api sambhavam asti, tridha or tredha, chaturdha, panchadha, shaddha, shodha, saptadha, ashtadha, navadha and dashadha. Ekashaha, or one by one. Dvishaha, trishaha, chatushaha, panchashaha, shatashaha, sahasrashaha. So please, shabdan kathayatu maya saha. Astu, agre gacchama. Tari atra kala vachakani santi avyayani. So what are these kala vachakani words? Adya, adyatve, usha, adon, shvaha, parashvaha, hyaha, paredyuhu. The next day, paredyavi, aparedyuhu on the following day, sadhya at once, adhuna samprati, pura purvedyuhu, anyedyuhu, anyataredyuhu, itaredyuhu, idanim, uttaredyuhu, ubhayadyuhu, ubheyuhu, ubhayeyuhu, aishamaha. It is, for example, never really come across this. Parut, parari. Tari nutana padani atra santi. Prayoge anetum prayatnamapi kartum shaknuma. Astu. Tari ekam tis vakyam vadantu. I went to the garden yesterday. Tari aham hyaha udyanam gatavati or agachham uttamam. Astu. So hyaha etasya upayogaha bhavati. Tari agre gatva pashyama. So took this again from Narendra Arya's book, Functional Sanskrit, its communicative aspect, and there we see that you've got wonderful practice atra. Tari atra kinchit drakshama. Astu. Tari sa vadati vyavaharaha purvam pradattam paఠ्यक्रमम् agre sarayitum atra avyaya padanam vyavaharaha sanniveshitaha atha iti avyayam vishayasya arambhe mangalartham vyavahriyate. Yatha examples, it says atha avyayanam vyavaharaha. Next, bahu prasiddham asti yoga sutre atha yoganushasanam. And then next, atha linganushasanam, instructions about linga. Atha can also be anantaram. So atha shashakasya varaha agataha. So it was the turn. Atha can also mean in that sense. And you've got some very interesting things he's got here. That is swasamayam nitu atra pathantu. But I just wanted to come down to a few other practices, like you've got akashaha uchchahi asti, bhumihi nichahi asti, uchchahi gaya. So uchchahi can be high and on top, and it can also mean high in terms of the volume. Both cases they are like avyayas. So they look like tritiya bahuvachanam, but in this case it is an avyaya padam. Tari atra, this was a very interesting one, where he said kutaha. Kutaha kutaha iti prashno badhate mam bhrisham sada कुतो जन्म कुतो मृत्युः कुतो दुःखं सुखं कुतः कुतो भीरुः कृशश्चाहं वीराः स्थूलाश्च ते कुतः कुतोऽहं निर्धनो रुग्णः स्वस्थास्ते धनिकाः कुतः कुतो भीरुः कृशा चाहं वीरा स्थूला च सा कुतः कुतोऽहं निर्धना रुग्णा स्वस्था सा धनिका कुतः is an alternative reading. So kutah, why, where from, etc. is what is indicated by this particular avyaya that we've already encountered also. So there are few repetitions, but there are few new ones. But atra abhyasasya uttama avasara bhavati. Atah kripaya स्वयं तत्र किंचित पश्यन्तु पश्यतु अत्र तत्र अत्र सुखं तत्र दुःखम् अत्र तत्र च सर्वत्र वर्तते परमेश्वरः अन्यत्र चापि तत् स्थानं कुत्र स्याद् यत्र नास्ति सः. ओके, एवम् उत्तम प्रश्न. इन्फैक्ट् अत्र सा कथा अपि अस्ति न, यद् एकः अध्यापकः नूतनं शिष्यं परीक्षितुम् इष्टवान्. तर्हि सः तम् अपृच्छत् यत् ईश्वरः कुत्र अस्ति. छात्रः झटिति अवदत्, हे गुरो, ईश्वरः कुत्र नास्ति इति. So this is in the same lines as the one that we've just read. Okay, so कृपया एतत् किञ्चित् पश्यन्तु. Similarly, we've got more here, but atra he's also given us a little, in the second column, a little comparative study with words that are in use in our other regional languages as well. Astu, tari tasya kinchit abhyasan karotu. Tari atra avashyam pause button sthapayitva purnasya abhyasam kurvantu. एकवारं न्यूनातिन्यूनं सर्वान् अत्र अभ्यासान् उच्चैः उक्त्वा कुर्वन्तु इति मम हार्दिक अनुरोधः अस्ति. तर्हि heartfelt request to all of you is that for these 3 pages, please press the pause button and just read it aloud. Read the entire thing aloud and you will see how much familiarity you already have with the language. Astu, but what that will do is it will bring the language to your mouth, and once you have the taste of the language, the entire system will tend to remember it and want to use it as well. Astu, tari kripaya tat karotu. Punah atra with the examples added, with some of the examples added, atra sarvam api nasti. Kintu eka parijnanaya. Avyai bhavah praya trayastrimshadha. Just to go back to what we had talked of during the samasa study. Tari atra pashyantu. Samiparthakah upakrishnam iti bhavati, abhavarthakah nirmakshikam. All of this, all of the endings there indicate that it is an indeclinable form astu of that particular samasa. Astu tari mitrani, vayam idanim dharma vishaye ekam charcham karishyamah Piyushena saha. Namaste Piyusha.
Pranamah Arye.
Tari tava shodha karyam katham chalati?
Idanim mama shodha karyam samyak chalati.
Astu, tava shodha karyasya vishayam kinchit shravayasi kim?
प्रयासं करोमि. अहं ब्रह्मचर्याश्रम धर्म विषये शोधकार्यं करोमि. पूर्वस्मिन् काले भारतवर्षे छात्राः गुरुगृहं गच्छन्ति स्म. तत् ब्रह्मचर्याश्रम इति कथ्यते. इदानीम् अपि आधुनिककाले छात्राः पठन्ति.
सत्यं.
तर्हि तत्र छात्रेषु के गुणाः आसन्, इदानीम् आधुनिकछात्रेषु के गुणाः सन्ति,
तस्य तुलनात्मकं
गुणयोः मध्ये तुलनां कृत्वा आधुनिककाले के गुणाः प्रयोजनीयाः एतस्मिन् विषये कार्यं करोमि.
अति रुचिरम् अस्ति तव कार्यं. किन्तु तत्र त्वया धर्मविषये कः आविष्कारः कृतः अस्ति?
पूर्वस्मिन् काले अहं दृष्टवान् ब्रह्मचर्याश्रमधर्मः. तत्र छात्राणां कृते के नियमाः आसन्. इदानीं शब्दकल्पद्रुमे तथा वाचस्पत्ये अहं दृष्टवान् धर्मशब्दे विविधाः गुणाः अन्तर्निहिताः सन्ति.
अस्तु, तर्हि अस्माभिः अत्र यथा दृश्यते तत्र एतत् कुतः प्राप्ताः सन्ति त्वया?
विविधेषु पुराणेषु एतानि सर्वाणि सन्ति.
एवं वा?
आम्. आर्ये अत्र आश्चर्यम् अस्ति यत् गुणेषु परस्परसम्बन्धः अतीव लक्ष्यते. यथा उदाहरणं ददामि. धर्मविषये अहं यदा दृष्टवान् तदा तत्र सत्यम् आसीत्।
सत्यं।
सत्ये तु 13 आकाराः सन्ति, महाभारते उक्तम्।
एवम्।
आम्, तत्र अहिंसा अस्ति। अहिंसायाः वर्धनेन शान्तिः
भवति।
भविष्यति। तर्हि सर्वे गुणाः परस्परं सम्बन्धिताः सन्ति।
उत्तमं। पुनः एतस्य प्रयोगं कुत्र पश्यसि त्वं?
तस्मात् कारणात् इदानीं चर्चां करोमि कथम् एकस्य गुणस्य आचारं कृत्वा छात्रः कथं गुणवान् भवितुं शक्यते।
उत्तमम्।
एतत् लक्ष्यमस्ति मम शोधकार्ये।
तर्हि अहं तु चिन्तयामि यत् आधुनिककाले इदानीम् अस्माकं सर्वकारेण NEP इति बहु उक्तमस्ति यत् तत्र वाल्यू एड्युकेशन्, मोरल् एड्युकेशन् इत्यादिकं भवेत् इति। अहं तु चिन्तयामि यत् भवतः कार्यस्य तत्र बहु लाभः भवितुं शक्नोति।
आर्ये नेशनल् एड्युकेशन् पालिसी 2020 तत्र उक्तं छात्रेषु अहिंसा, सत्यं, दया, प्रेमं, स्वच्छता एतानि मानवीयगुणाः, स्वच्छता एते मानवीयगुणाः छात्रेषु स्थातव्याः। एतत् उक्तम्।
उत्तमं। वयं सर्वे अपि तत्र शुभकामनाः ज्ञापयामः यत् तव कार्यम् अतीव सफलं भवतु, येन एतादृशगुणानाम् अस्माकं देशे वर्धनं भवति चेत् वयं पुनरपि तथा समृद्धभारतं भवितुं शक्नुमः। अस्तु, बहु धन्यवादः।
प्रणामः आर्ये।
धन्यवादः। So coming back after that interesting conversation with Piyush, coming back to the definition. Kshama satyam dama shaucham danamindriya sanyamaha ahimsa guru shushrusha tirthanusaranam daya arjavam lobha shunyatvam deva brahmana pujanam anabhyasuya cha tatha dharma samanya uchyate iti विष्णुपुराणस्य धर्मलक्षणम् अस्ति। एतद् मत्स्यपुराणे किं वदन्ति? अद्रोहश्चाप्यलोभश्च दमोभूतदयातपः ब्रह्मचर्यं ततः सत्वम् अनुक्रोशः क्षमाधृतिः सनातनस्य धर्मस्य मूलमेतद्दुरासदम्. What is important is when you read adrohascha api lobhascha, if you read, it will make the contrary sense. So you mustn't miss the sandhi that is there is alobhascha. Iko yanachi sandhi asti, tari cha api alobhascha. Tari kadachit tatra logic api karyam karoti when you are trying to do the sandhi in the middle of verses. Anyadekam etatu asti Brihaspati Purane vartate. दया क्षमानसूया च शौचानाया समङ्गलम् अकार्पण्यम् अस्पृहत्वम् सर्वसाधारणानि च. Okay, so these are the general definitions, and what you see there is that there is a lot of commonality of the values and practices that are associated with the concept of dharma. So when we're talking of the concept of dharma and talking about a definition, this one by Manusmriti is one of the most popular ones. Tatra kim asti? Dhritih kshamadamosteyam shauchamindriya nigraha dhir vidya satyamakrodho dashakam dharma lakshanam. Dashakam bhavati samanyataya dharmasya lakshanam. The next one is by the Brahma Vaivarta Puranam. Kim vadati? Vidya dayadama shaucham satyamasteya tatapaha jitendriyatvam akrodham lajja dharma iti smritihi. Brahmanda Purane kim vadanti? Brahmacharyena satyena tapasa cha paravartate danena niyamenapi Kshama shauchena vallabha ahinsaya sushantya cha asteyenapi vartate etair dashabhirangaistu dharmameva prasuchayet. Mahabharate kim vadanti? सांगकर्म तपश्चैव सत्यम अक्रोध एव च स्वेषु दारेषु सन्तोषः शौचं विद्यानसूयिता आत्मज्ञानं तितिक्षा च धर्मः साधारणो नृप. The king is being instructed about what dharma is, and tatra etat sarvam uktam vartate. There is some new qualities, some different ones, but largely we see that dharma was the concept of the practice of values and not about religious ideas. This is a very, very important idea for us to internalize, because then we will be able to come back on track on implementation of these values in our lives, so that we can achieve excellence in everything that we strive for. एतत् गरुडपुराणस्य श्लोकः अस्ति सत्यं दमस्तपः शौचं सन्तोषः क्षान्तिरार्जवं ज्ञानं शमोदया दानम् एष धर्मः सनातनः. तस्य द्वाराणि यजनं तपोदानं दयाक्षमा ब्रह्मचर्यं तथा सत्यं तीर्थानुसरणं शुभं स्वाध्यायसेवा साधूनां सहवासः सुरार्चनं गुरूणां चैव शुश्रूषा ब्राह्मणानां च पूजनम्. This is in the Vishnu Dharmottara Puranam. So you're also getting an opportunity to get familiar with some of the names of the Puranas. Agre Pashyama. Esha dharmo mahanstyago danam bhuta daya tatha brahmacharyam sada satyam anukrosho dhriti kshama sanatanasya dharmasya moolametat samasataha. Okay, so these are the qualities of the Sanatana Dharma. So as we come to the last part of our session, I chose this particular quotation by Vyas Houston, who is the founder of the American Sanskrit Institute and is doing some marvelous work there in promoting Sanskrit. And more beautifully is the fact that he has a feeling for the spirit of the language, which is extremely precious in a scholar. So he is talking of Sanskrit as sacred model of language, and these are some characteristics that he considers are reflective of sacred languages. He says, the single most outstanding difference between a sacred and a survival language is the definition, orientation and usage in the language of the word I. I, or its equivalent, is the source of language. Without I, there is no you, he, she or it. The evolution of the word I into a complex language is a process of creation. In the development of a sacred language, the process, the cultural patterns, the process is a conscious one. Language is an emanation, a creation, an instrument of I. In a survival language, I is an effect of the cultural patterns already unconsciously established by the language. In Sanskrit, even the sounds which make the word for I are consciously selected. Hum. Is the first spoken sound as well as the first sound of the Sanskrit alphabet. It can be discovered by breathing in and with the mouth slightly open, releasing the breath with sound that requires a minimal effort. It naturally arises in the throat before the articulation of all other sounds. Ha is the last letter of the Sanskrit alphabet. After all, the systemic patterns created by the movement of the tongue and lips have produced in perfect order all the other letters of the alphabet. The final sound is Ha. It also is the only consonant sound that moves by the power of the breath alone, and the only consonant in exact proximity to A. The final letter M is the very last sound produced in the mouth because it occurs due to the closing of the lips. In Sanskrit, a hum is the beginning, the breath of life which brings forth creation, and the end. And this is expressed not just symbolically by the letters aham, but physically based on their location in the mouth. Adbhutam naiva? So I've got some references for you here, including Vyas Houston's article on this particular topic. Astu tari, asham karomi yat adyatana patham kritva अव्ययानाम् अपि परिचयः जातः अस्ति. तत्र तु बहूनि अव्ययानि सन्ति, अतः सामान्यप्रयोगे तेषां तु अभ्यासः स्यादेव, किन्तु सचेतनरूपेण इतः परं प्रयोगं कुर्वन्तु इति उक्त्वा अहमत्र विरमामि। युष्माकम् अध्ययनम् इतोपि शुभकरं भवतु इति प्रार्थयामि च।